Jenna's car rolled down the driveway, and the house fell into a quiet I hadn't felt in a long time. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle in, trying to shake off the nagging sense that something was off. Jenna and I had been married for 7 years, and she'd been working like crazy lately, squeezing every last drop out of her day to keep her nail salon running smoothly. She's a professional manicurist, one of the best in town. Her clients loved her, and she loved her work. But I knew she was burning out, so I practically pushed her into taking this 3-day getaway. I told her it was for her own good, but really, I had my own plans. See, I'm an interior designer by trade. I spend my days creating beautiful spaces for other people, but our own bedroom, the place that's supposed to be our sanctuary, had been neglected for years. The paint was faded, the furniture outdated, and the whole vibe of the room felt tired. It wasn't just the room either. Jenna and I had been off lately, like something was slowly unraveling between us. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt it, gnawing at me from the inside out. I figured maybe a fresh start in the bedroom could help bring us back together. I'd surprise her with a complete renovation while she was away, something to show her I still cared, that I was still in this, even if things felt distant between us lately. I wanted her to walk into a room that reflected who we were when we first fell in love, full of hope, passion, and possibility. As soon as she left, I got to work. Moving the furniture by myself was a struggle. Our dresser was heavy as hell, and don't even get me started on the armchair. But I managed to clear everything out except for the bed. That damn bed. It had been with us for 5 years, a solid wooden frame with a headboard that used to be stylish but now just looked tired, like everything else in the room. I planned to replace it with something sleek and modern, something that would give the room a whole new feel. As I started to drag the bed away from the wall, the headboard gave way with a crack. It startled me, but not as much as what fell out from behind it. My heart stopped when I saw it, an old, yellow condom, used, and filled with dried semen. The sight of it hit me like a freight train. The smell was rancid, making my stomach turn. I stumbled back, my mind racing. Who the hell did this belong to? When had it been used? And how had it ended up in our bedroom? The size of the condom was the first thing that stood out. It was bigger than anything I'd ever seen or used. My head was spinning, trying to make sense of it. I rushed to the bathroom and vomited, my hands trembling as I gripped the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But it was. When I finally pulled myself together, I went back into the bedroom, the condom still lying there like some twisted reminder of a reality I didn't want to face. I grabbed a tissue, carefully picking it up and wrapping it in a plastic bag. My mind was racing, my thoughts a jumbled mess of anger, fear, and confusion. I knew I couldn't ask Jenna about this, at least not yet. I needed answers first, and I knew exactly how to get them. A DNA test. I'd send it off and find out exactly who this belonged to. Maybe it was nothing, something left behind from before we were together. But if it was recent, I didn't even want to think about that. Until I knew the truth, I had to keep going, had to act like everything was fine. I forced myself to focus on the renovation, even though the excitement I'd felt earlier was gone. I painted the walls a soft gray, Jenna's favorite color, and brought in the new furniture I'd picked out, but everything felt hollow, meaningless. I even installed hidden cameras in the corners of the room. I felt like a paranoid fool, but I needed to know if something was going on, something I couldn't see. By the time I was done, the room looked perfect. It was everything I'd envisioned, calm, elegant, a space that felt like it belonged to us again. But as I sat on the edge of the new bed, staring at the freshly painted walls, all I could think about was that condom and what it meant. Jenna would be home soon, and I had to pretend everything was normal. But deep down, I knew nothing would ever be the same between us. The days dragged on as I waited for the DNA results. I tried to keep busy, working on other projects, anything to keep my mind off what I had found. But no matter what I did, my thoughts kept circling back to that yellow condom and the implications it carried. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart skipped a beat, wondering if it was the lab with the results. Jenna called a few times during her trip, her voice cheerful, telling me about the spa treatments she was enjoying, the quaint shops she was exploring. I tried to match her tone, pretending everything was fine, but it was hard. Every word felt like a lie. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in some sort of twisted dream, waiting to wake up. Finally, the day came when Jenna was due to return. I'd finished the renovation just in time, and the room looked stunning. Fresh paint, new furniture, everything meticulously arranged to create the perfect ambience. But instead of feeling proud of my work, all I felt was dread. How could I pretend that everything was okay when I knew something was terribly wrong? The sound of Jenna's car pulling into the driveway snapped me out of my thoughts. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to smile as I went to greet her. She stepped through the door, looking radiant, her face glowing from the brake. "Hey, babe," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too," I replied, holding her a little too tightly, trying to push down the unease that was gnawing at me. "I have a surprise for you," I said, my voice strained. I led her upstairs to the bedroom, watching her reaction carefully as she stepped inside. Her eyes went wide, and a smile spread across her face. "Oh my God, this is amazing! You did all of this for me?" I nodded, trying to read her expression. She seemed genuinely happy, even touched. She walked around the room, running her fingers over the new furniture, admiring the colors, the decor. "It's perfect," she said, turning to me. "I can't believe you did this while I was away. You're the best." I forced a smile, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to believe her, wanted to think that everything was fine, that this was just a bad dream. But the doubt was still there, lurking in the back of my mind. That night, we slept in the new bed, Jenna curled up beside me, her hand resting on my chest. But sleep didn't come easily. I lay there in the dark, staring up at the ceiling, my mind racing. I kept thinking about that condom, about who it might belong to, and why it was in our bedroom. The days that followed were torture. I installed the hidden cameras without Jenna noticing, watching her every move like a hawk. But she didn't do anything suspicious. She went about her days as usual, going to work at the salon, coming home, spending time with me. In fact, she seemed even more affectionate than usual, kissing me more, laughing at my jokes, doing little things to make me happy. It was almost like she was trying to make up for something. A week passed, and then another. I kept waiting for something to happen, for Jenna to slip up, but nothing did. The cameras recorded hours of footage, Jenna getting dressed, Jenna brushing her hair, Jenna reading in bed, but nothing that gave me any reason to doubt her. Yet, the unease remained, growing stronger with each passing day. Then, on the 10th day, the call came. It was from the lab, and my heart sank as I answered. The voice on the other end was professional, clinical. They had the results. My hands trembled as I listened, the room spinning around me. The DNA didn't match mine. It belonged to someone else, a 23-year-old man named Brian Toffins. I didn't know who Brian was, but the reality of what this meant hit me like a sledgehammer. Jenna had been with someone else. The proof was undeniable, and it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. All those moments of doubt, of suspicion, they were real. And now, I had to confront Jenna with the truth. That evening, when Jenna came home from work, I was waiting for her. She smiled when she saw me, but the smile faded when she noticed the look on my face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Sit down," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "We need to talk." She sat down slowly, her eyes searching mine. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I found something while I was renovating the bedroom," I began, my voice trembling. "A condom." It was hidden behind the headboard. Jenna's face went pale. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the right words. I don't know what to say," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I do," I said, my voice cold. I had it tested. The DNA doesn't match mine. It belongs to a man named Brian Toffins. Care to explain? Her expression crumbled as she broke down into tears. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. It was a mistake. A horrible mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen. Then why did it happen, Jenna? I demanded, my voice rising. How could you do this to us? She buried her face in her hands, shaking with sobs. It happened 3 months ago, she began, her voice muffled. You were away for work, and I was feeling lonely. I went out with some friends, just to have fun. I met Brian at a club. He was charming, and I was stupid. I didn't plan on anything happening, but he slipped something into my drink. I didn't know what was going on until it was too late. Her words cut through me like a knife. I wanted to believe her, but the anger and betrayal were too strong. And you didn't think to tell me? I asked, my voice shaking with fury. You just let me think everything was fine? I was scared, she cried. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to lose you. I thought I could just forget about it, move on, and everything would be okay. But it's not okay, Jenna, I snapped. You lied to me. You kept this from me. How am I supposed to trust you after this? Jenna looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I've regretted it every single day since it happened. Please, don't leave me. I'll do anything to make this right. I stared at her, my heart torn between the love I still felt for her and the overwhelming sense of betrayal. I didn't know what to do, what to say. All I knew was that the life we'd built together had been shattered, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be put back together. The night was endless. I sat in the living room long after Jenna had gone to bed, replaying her words in my head. Her confession had been gut-wrenching, but something about it didn't sit right with me. She had claimed that Brian had drugged her, that she wasn't in control, but the doubt gnawed at me like a persistent itch. Was she telling the truth, or was this just a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of our marriage? I couldn't sleep, my mind running in circles. The image of that yellow condom kept flashing in my mind, along with the name I'd never heard before, Brian Toffins. Who was this guy? Where had he come from? And how had he ended up in my bed, with my wife? I needed answers, but Jenna's tears and apologies weren't enough. I needed proof, something concrete that would either confirm her story or blow it apart completely. I couldn't just take her word for it, not after she had lied to me for 3 months. The next morning, I woke up early, running on little more than adrenaline and coffee. Jenna was already in the kitchen, her eyes puffy and red from crying all night. She tried to talk to me, to offer some kind of comfort, but I brushed her off. I couldn't deal with her right now, not until I knew the full truth. I need to get up for a bit, I said, grabbing my keys. Jenna didn't ask where I was going, and I didn't volunteer the information. I could see the worry in her eyes, but I didn't care. I was past caring about her feelings. All I cared about was finding out what really happened. I spent the day digging. I called in a few favors, asking friends who had connections to help me track down information on Brian. It wasn't easy, but eventually, I found out where he lived, a small apartment in the city, not far from where Jenna had said she met him. I also found out he had a bit of a reputation, nothing too serious, but enough to make me feel uneasy. He was known for being a charmer, someone who could talk his way into anything, and out of any trouble he found himself in. By the time I returned home, it was late afternoon. Jenna was still there, pacing the living room, her face etched with worry. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes searching mine for any sign of what I was thinking. But I kept my face blank, refusing to give her any satisfaction. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice small. "Out," I replied curtly, moving past her to the kitchen. She followed me, desperate for some kind of connection. "Please, talk to me. We can get through this. I'll do anything, counseling, whatever it takes. Just don't shut me out." I turned to face her, my hands gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. I'm not shutting you out, Jenna. I'm trying to figure out what the hell is going on. I need to know the truth, and until I do, I don't want to hear any more of your excuses. Her face crumpled, but she didn't argue. She just nodded, wiping away fresh tears, and retreated to the bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That night, I went through the footage from the hidden cameras I'd installed. I wasn't expecting to find anything incriminating. Jenna had been acting normal, almost too normal. But as I scanned through the videos, something caught my eye. It was a small detail, something that might have slipped by if I hadn't been looking so closely. It was a moment in the footage, just a few seconds, where Jenna was on her phone, texting someone. Her expression was tense, and her fingers moved quickly over the screen. I couldn't see who she was texting or what she was saying, but the way she kept glancing at the bedroom door, as if she was afraid I might walk in, set off alarm bells. I rewound the footage, watching it again and again, trying to piece together what it might mean. Was she in contact with Brian? Was there more to this story than she was letting on? I couldn't be sure, but it fueled my suspicion that she wasn't being completely honest with me. The next day, I decided to confront her. I couldn't wait any longer. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Jenna was in the bathroom, getting ready for work, when I cornered her. "Who were you texting last night?" I asked, my voice hard. She looked startled, her eyes wide with fear. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb with me, Jenna. I saw you on your phone." "Who were you texting?" She hesitated, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. "It was just a friend," she stammered. I was upset, and I needed to talk to someone. "Which friend?" I pressed. "Just someone from work," she said, her voice trembling. "It's nothing, I swear." I didn't believe her, not for a second. "I'm done with the lies, Jenna. If you can't be honest with me, then there's no point in us trying to fix this." She broke down, collapsing onto the edge of the bathtub, her face in her hands. "I'm not lying to you," she sobbed. "I've told you everything. Please, you have to believe me." But I couldn't. The damage was done. I turned and walked out, leaving her there, crying in the bathroom. I couldn't bear to look at her anymore. That evening, after she left for work, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I drove to Brian's apartment, my heart pounding in my chest the whole way there. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew I needed to confront him, to see the man who had turned my life upside down. I found his building easily enough, a rundown place in a sketchy part of town. I climbed the stairs to his floor, my fists clenched at my sides. When I reached his door, I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say. But then I heard voices from inside, Brian's voice, and someone else's. A woman. My heart sank as I realized what was happening. Jenna wasn't the only woman he'd been involved with. I was just one more fool caught in his web. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose it. Instead, I turned around and walked away. There was nothing left for me here, nothing that would make this any better. As I got back into my car, I knew that the only thing I could do now was confront Jenna with everything I'd learned. She needed to know that I wasn't some idiot who would fall for her lies anymore. When I got home, Jenna was already there, sitting on the couch, her eyes puffy from crying. She looked up at me as I walked in, her expression full of hope, but I didn't give her the chance to speak. "I went to see Brian today," I said, my voice cold. Her face went pale, and she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I didn't need to talk to him," I continued. "I know what kind of person he is. And I know what kind of person you are too, Jenna. This is over. I'm done." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. I had no sympathy left for her. All I felt was anger and betrayal. She reached out to me, pleading, "Please, don't do this. We can work through it." I love you. But it was too late. The damage was done, and there was no going back. I walked past her, heading for the bedroom to pack a bag. I couldn't stay here, not with her, not anymore. As I packed, I heard her sobbing in the living room, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. This was the end, and there was no point in pretending otherwise. The life we'd built together had been shattered, and all that was left were the broken pieces. The night in the motel felt like an eternity. I lay there in the dark, my mind racing with everything that had happened. Finding that condom, hearing Jenna's tearful confession, and now this overwhelming sense of betrayal, it was all too much. The cheap motel room's thin walls and creaky bed did nothing to soothe the turmoil churning inside me. I barely slept, just stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. By the time morning came, I was exhausted and no closer to any answers. I knew I couldn't stay in that dingy room forever, but the thought of going back home, of facing Jenna, made me feel sick. Still, I had to know more. I had to understand what had really happened. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jenna. Please come home. I need to talk to you. There's something you have to see. Part of me didn't want to go. I didn't know if I could handle another round of her apologies and tears. But something in the message pulled at me, a hint of desperation that I couldn't ignore. Against my better judgment, I got in the car and drove home. When I walked into the house, Jenna was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes swollen and red from crying. She looked up when I came in, hope flickering in her gaze before it quickly turned to anxiety. I didn't say anything, just stood there, waiting for her to speak. I know you don't believe me, she began, her voice shaky. And I don't blame you. But there's something I need to show you, something that might help you understand what happened. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Jenna, if this is just another... It's not, she cut me off, her tone urgent. Just watch the video. She led me to the living room, where her laptop was set up on the coffee table. I sat down, my arms crossed, as she hit play. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy footage from a security camera. It was dated 3 months ago, the night she claimed everything had gone wrong. The video started with Jenna and her friends walking into a club. They were laughing, clearly enjoying themselves. I watched as they made their way to the bar, Jenna ordering a drink, her smile bright and carefree. It hurt to see her like that, so happy, so unaware of the nightmare that was about to unfold. Then he appeared, Brian. He was tall, confident, with a slick charm that seemed to draw people in. He sidled up next to Jenna, striking up a conversation. I felt my jaw clench as I watched them talk, Brian flashing that easy smile, Jenna laughing at something he said. But then, my blood ran cold. Brian's hand moved quickly, slipping something into Jenna's drink while she was distracted. It was so subtle, so quick, that if I hadn't been watching for it, I might have missed it. Jenna had no idea. She took a sip, completely unaware that her night was about to take a dark turn. Within minutes, her demeanor changed. She started to sway, blinking slowly as if she couldn't keep her eyes open. Brian moved closer, putting his arm around her, guiding her out of the club. She was barely conscious, her body limp as he led her to a cab. I could barely watch as the video showed them arriving at our house, Brian supporting her as they made their way inside. The footage ended as they entered the front door, leaving me staring at the screen in stunned silence. My heart pounded in my chest as the full weight of what I had just seen settled in. Jenna turned to me, tears streaming down her face. I didn't wake up in a hotel, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I woke up in our bed. The bed where you found that condom. I didn't remember anything from the night before. When I realized what had happened, I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I could barely process what she was saying. The image of Jenna waking up in our bed, confused, violated, and alone, was too much to bear. My mind flashed back to the moment I found that condom, the shock, the disgust, the anger. And now I knew exactly how it had ended up there. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice hoarse. Why didn't you come to me when you woke up? She wiped her eyes, her hands trembling. I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see me like that. I thought if I just buried it, I could move on, and we could pretend it never happened. But I was wrong. I know that now. I'm so sorry. I stared at her, my emotions a tangled mess. The evidence was undeniable. Brian had drugged her, taken advantage of her in our own home. But the lies, the secrets, how could I ever trust her again? I need time, I finally said, my voice strained. I can't just. I need to process this. She nodded, her eyes full of pain. I understand. Just, please don't leave. Not like this. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I got up and walked out of the house, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on me like a physical burden. As I drove around aimlessly, the video replayed in my mind over and over. I had proof now, undeniable proof that Jenna hadn't willingly betrayed me. But that didn't erase the months of lies, the fear and doubt that had been festering in our relationship. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I could forgive her, or if I even wanted to. All I knew was that the life we built together was shattered, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. The drive home felt like an eternity. My mind was a storm of emotions, anger, confusion, sorrow, and a growing desire for revenge. The video Jenna showed me played on a loop in my head, every detail burned into my memory. The way Brian had slipped something into her drink, the way he had guided her out of the club and into our home, her lifeless body crumpling onto the bed. It was all too much to bear. I couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't shake the image of him violating her in our bed, the bed where we had shared so much. The thought made my blood boil. I knew then that I couldn't just let this go. Brian had taken something from us, something precious, and I couldn't rest until I had made him pay. But there was also Jenna to consider. As much as I wanted to lash out at her, to blame her for what had happened, I knew deep down that she was a victim in all of this. She hadn't chosen this, hadn't wanted any of it. She had been violated, drugged, and taken advantage of by a predator. And she had been living with that trauma in silence, too scared and ashamed to come to me. It wasn't her fault, and I knew that. But knowing and accepting were two different things. I needed to confront Brian, to make him face the consequences of what he'd done. Only then could I even begin to think about how to move forward with Jenna. The next day, I called in a few favors, gathering as much information about Brian as I could. I wasn't going to go in blind. I needed to know everything there was to know about him before I confronted him. It didn't take long to find out where he worked, what his routine was, and most importantly, where he lived. The guy wasn't exactly careful about covering his tracks. He thought he could get away with anything, and that made me all the more determined to prove him wrong. I spent the next few days planning, thinking through every detail of what I was about to do. I wasn't going to kill him, I wasn't a murderer. But I wanted him to feel the same helplessness and fear that Jenna had felt that night. I wanted him to understand that actions have consequences, that he couldn't just go around ruining lives without paying the price. Finally, the day came when I was ready. I followed Brian from his job to the same seedy apartment I'd scoped out earlier. It was in a rough part of town, the kind of place where people mind their own business. That suited my purposes just fine. I waited until he was alone, slipping into his apartment complex behind him. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached his door, my fists clenched at my sides. When he opened the door to see who was there, he barely had time to react before I shoved him back into the apartment, slamming the door shut behind me. He stumbled, caught off guard, but quickly regained his composure. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his voice full of bravado. I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped forward, my eyes locked on his. "You know who I am, Brian. And you know why I'm here." Recognition flickered in his eyes, followed by a smirk that made me want to knock his teeth out. "Ah, the husband. I figured you'd come around eventually." I felt a surge of anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. You think this is a joke? You think you can just do what you did and walk away without consequences? He shrugged, leaning back against the wall, his arrogance infuriating. It's not my fault your wife couldn't keep her hands to herself. Maybe you should take a good look at your own marriage before you come after me. That was it. I snapped. I lunged at him, my fist connecting with his jaw before he had a chance to react. He staggered back, clutching his face, but I didn't let up. I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall, my voice low and dangerous. You drugged her, you piece of shit. She didn't choose you. You took advantage of her, and you think you can just walk away from that? His smirk was gone now, replaced by a look of fear. Listen, man, it wasn't like that. Shut up! I shouted, slamming him against the wall again. You don't get to talk your way out of this. You're going to pay for what you did. And if you ever come near Jenna again, I swear to God, you'll regret it. Brian tried to struggle, but I was too angry, too determined to let him go. I didn't stop until he was on the floor, bloodied and bruised, gasping for breath. I didn't care if he called the cops, if he tried to press charges. I had no regrets. Finally, I let him go, standing over him as he curled up on the floor, groaning in pain. Remember this, Brian, I said, my voice cold. Remember what it feels like to be powerless, to have someone else decide your fate. Because if you ever come near us again, you'll get worse. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. My heart was pounding, my hands still shaking with adrenaline. I didn't feel victorious. If anything, I felt hollow, like I'd only done the bare minimum to reclaim some sense of justice. But it wasn't over. Not yet. When I got home, Jenna was sitting on the couch, her face pale and drawn. She looked up at me as I walked in, her eyes filled with worry. Where were you? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I went to see him, I said, my voice flat. Her eyes widened in shock. What did you do? I made sure he understands that he'll never come near you again, I replied. That's all you need to know. Jenna was silent for a long moment, and then she broke down, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry for everything. I wish I could take it all back. I wish it had never happened. I walked over to her, sitting down beside her on the couch. I didn't know what to say, so I just wrapped my arms around her, holding her close as she cried into my chest. The anger I had felt for her, the hurt and betrayal, had started to fade. I knew it wasn't her fault. She hadn't chosen this, hadn't wanted any of it. Brian had taken something from both of us, and we were both struggling to pick up the pieces. I forgive you, I whispered, the words feeling both heavy and light at the same time. I know it wasn't your fault, Jenna. And I'm sorry I doubted you. But we need to be honest with each other from now on. No more secrets. No more lies. She nodded, sniffling as she wiped her eyes. I promise. No more lies. I want to make things right between us. We'll get through this, I said, my voice steady. We've been through hell, but we're still here. We'll figure it out, together. Jenna looked up at me, her eyes filled with hope and gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. I love you so much. I love you too, I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. We still had a long way to go, but for the first time in months, I felt like we might actually make it through this. As I held her, I realized that revenge hadn't brought me peace, but it had given me the closure I needed to start healing. Now it was time to rebuild what had been broken, to move forward with Jenna, one step at a time. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we were in it together, and that was enough. The decision to leave everything behind wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The old house, with all its memories, both good and bad, had become a place of pain, a constant reminder of what we'd been through. After everything that happened, Jenna and I realized we needed more than just forgiveness and time, we needed a new beginning. We spent weeks looking for the right place. We knew we wanted to move somewhere far enough away from the city to escape the weight of our past, but close enough to feel connected to something familiar. We finally found it, a small town on the outskirts of the city, quiet and tucked away, the kind of place where life moves just a little bit slower. The house we chose was nothing like our old one. It was a modest cottage, surrounded by tall trees that whispered in the wind and a yard that seemed to stretch endlessly into the forest beyond. It wasn't flashy or modern, but it had a warmth to it, a sense of peace that we both felt as soon as we walked through the door. Moving day was bittersweet. We packed up our things in silence, both of us lost in our thoughts. The house we were leaving behind had seen us at our best and worst, and walking away from it felt like saying goodbye to a part of ourselves. But as we loaded the last box into the car, there was also a sense of relief. We were closing one chapter and opening another. The drive to our new home was quiet, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like we were both taking a moment to let go of everything that had happened, to leave it behind on the road that stretched out behind us. When we arrived, the sun was just beginning to set, casting a warm, golden light over the house. I remember feeling a strange mix of emotions, excitement, nervousness, but most of all, hope. Hope that this place, this new life we were about to build, would be different. Jenna and I spent the first few days unpacking, settling in, and making the house our own. It wasn't easy at first. The shadows of the past were still there, lurking in the corners, waiting to pounce when we least expected it. But as we filled the rooms with our things, our laughter, our presence, those shadows began to fade. One evening, as we were finishing dinner, Jenna looked at me with that familiar spark in her eyes, a spark I hadn't seen in months. "Let's take a walk," she said, standing up and reaching for my hand. We walked through the trees that bordered our property, the cool evening air carrying the scent of pine and earth. There was a small clearing just a short distance from the house, a place where the trees opened up to reveal a sky full of stars. We stood there, looking up at the vastness above us, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of calm. "This is what we needed," Jenna said quietly, her hand still in mine. "A place where we can just be. No reminders, no ghosts. Just us." I nodded, feeling the truth in her words. "I think we can finally move forward here," I said. "Start fresh. Build something new." Jenna turned to me, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "We've been through so much, and I know we still have a long way to go. But I'm ready. I'm ready to leave the past behind and focus on what's ahead." I looked at her, seeing the strength that had carried us both through the darkest times. I knew then that we were going to be okay, that this place, this life, was our chance to rebuild. "We'll do it together," I said, pulling her close. "No more looking back." As we stood there, holding each other under the stars, the weight of everything that had happened began to lift. The anger, the pain, the fear, it all started to fade, replaced by a sense of purpose, of determination to make this new life work. In the days that followed, we threw ourselves into creating a home that reflected who we were now, not who we had been. We painted the walls in colors that made us smile, filled the rooms with things that brought us joy, and spent our evenings talking about the future instead of dwelling on the past. The house became a place of healing, a sanctuary where we could breathe, laugh, and love again without the shadows of what had been. We planted a garden together, watched it grow, and with it, our bond grew stronger. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch watching the sun set over the trees, Jenna turned to me with a smile. "I'm happy here," she said. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like we're exactly where we're supposed to be." I smiled back, feeling a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. "Me too," I said. "This is where we start over." And it was. This new house, this new life, became the foundation of everything we wanted to build together. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was ours. And as we moved forward, side by side, I knew that no matter what challenges came our way, we would face them together, with a strength that had been forged in the fire of our past and a love that had only grown stronger because of it.